Imagine a battlefield. Soldiers exhausted, adrenaline pumping, fear creeping in, and yet, in the midst of chaos, there is one undeniable truth. The leader eats last. Not because they have to, not because it's some written rule, but because they choose to, because the strongest leaders understand something most don't. When you take care of your people will take care of the mission. But in today's world, we see the opposite, don't we? Leaders who put themselves first, who hoard resources, who make decisions driven by fear rather than trust. And what happens? Employees disengage, innovation slows, and organizations crumble from within. So today, let's talk about what real leadership looks like. Leadership that builds trust. Leadership that creates lasting success. Leadership that puts people first. Leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in our charge. It's about understanding that the true measure of leadership is not authority, but the willingness to create an environment where people feel safe. Safe to speak, safe to take risks, safe to be themselves without fear of punishment or humiliation. Think about it. When people feel safe, they thrive. They bring their best ideas forward, they collaborate without hesitation, and they work not because they have to, but because they want to. They are driven by something bigger than themselves. But when fear replaces trust, everything changes. People become guarded, they hold back, they play it safe, and they spend more energy protecting themselves than contributing to the mission. Trust is not built in a day, nor is it something that can be mandated from the top. It is earned through consistent actions, through the small moments that signal, I've got your back. It happens when a leader stands up for their team when it would be easier to stay silent. It happens when mistakes are met with learning opportunities rather than reprimands. It happens when people know that their leaders will put their well-being above personal gain. In organizations where trust is absent, people compete against each other instead of supporting one another. They keep information to themselves because knowledge is power, and power means survival. The culture shifts from one of shared responsibility to self-preservation, where everyone is looking out for themselves. And in that kind of environment, creativity dies, productivity slows, morale crumbles. But in environments where trust is strong, people feel a sense of belonging. They know they are valued, not just for what they do, but for who they are. They don't waste time covering their tracks or second-guessing their every move because they know their leader is not waiting for them to fail. Rather, they are there to help them succeed. Trust is the foundation of great leadership. It cannot be demanded, it must be given. And when leaders choose to foster trust, they create teams that will go the extra mile, not because they're forced to, but because they believe in something greater than themselves. In every organization, there are two types of threats: external and internal. External threats come from competitors, shifting markets, economic downturns, and unforeseen challenges. These are the battles every business, every team, every leader must face. But internal threats? These are the ones that destroy organizations from within. Gossip, backstabbing, fear, insecurity, toxic competition. When these take root, they become the silent killers of morale, trust, and progress. Great leaders understand that their most important job is not simply to drive profits or increase efficiency. It is to build a circle of safety, a culture where people feel protected, valued, and supported. Because when people feel safe within, they can focus their energy on fighting the battles outside. But when they feel threatened inside, they become distracted, defensive, and disengaged. Think about a time when you worked in an environment where you constantly had to look over your shoulder, where speaking up came with consequences, where mistakes weren't met with support but with punishment. What happened? Did you feel motivated? Did you give your best effort? Or did you spend most of your time calculating your next move, making sure you weren't the next target? Now think about the opposite, a team where people trust one another, where leaders defend their people even when mistakes are made, where no one is afraid to ask for help or admit when they don't have the answer. What happens in that environment? People take risks. They innovate. They push beyond what they thought was possible, not because they have to, but because they want to. The circle of safety is not about eliminating challenges. It's about creating an environment where people know they won't have to face them alone. It's about ensuring that no matter how tough things get, no one inside the circle has to fight for their own survival. But too often, organizations prioritize numbers over people. Leaders who focus solely on quarterly targets, stock prices, or cutting costs without considering the human impact create cultures of fear. When people feel like they are expendable, they act accordingly. They withhold ideas, they avoid responsibility, they prioritize self-preservation over collaboration. And once that mindset takes hold, trust erodes and the entire foundation begins to crack. The most successful teams, the ones that withstand the toughest challenges, the ones that come out stronger no matter what happens, those are the teams with leaders who expand the circle of safety, not shrink it. Leaders who recognize that their job is not to be at the top of the pyramid looking down, but to be at the center, ensuring that everyone within that circle knows they are protected, valued, and never alone. Leadership is not a rank. It is not a title. It is a responsibility. And the best leaders, the ones who inspire loyalty, the ones who build organizations that last, understand one simple truth. Leadership is about service. It is about putting the needs of others before your own. It is about choosing what is right over what is easy, about lifting others up rather than standing above them. Yet too often we see the opposite. Leaders who hoard power, leaders who chase personal gain at the expense of their people, leaders who take credit for success but assign blame for failure. In these environments, people don't feel inspired. They feel used. They become disengaged, operating out of necessity rather than passion, doing only what is required rather than what is possible. But real leaders, the ones who stand the test of time, operate differently. They understand that leadership is not about them, it is about the people they serve. They take on the weight of responsibility so their teams can focus on doing their best work. They don't demand trust, they earn it. Not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of service. Checking in on a struggling team member, giving credit where it's due, stepping in when someone needs support. Service-based leadership creates a culture where people feel valued, and when people feel valued, they give more. They push harder, they innovate, collaborate, and contribute not because they have to, but because they believe in the mission. They know their leader has their back, and in return, they show up fully. But service is not always easy. It requires sacrifice. It means making tough decisions, not for personal benefit, but for the well-being of the team. It means taking responsibility when things go wrong and giving away recognition when things go right. It means standing in front of danger, absorbing pressure so others can do their jobs without fear. True leadership is measured not by how much power you hold, but by how many people you lift. It is not about how many follow you, but how many you empower to lead alongside you. It is not about what you get, but what you give. And when leaders embrace service over self, they create teams that are not just productive, but truly unstoppable. Leadership is not just about strategy, decision-making, or authority. At its core, leadership is about people. And people are driven by something deeper than logic or reason alone. They are driven by chemistry. Not the kind found in a science lab, but the kind that influences how we connect, how we trust, and how we work together. Inside each of us, a delicate balance of chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and cortisol, shapes our emotions, our behaviors, and ultimately, our ability to function as a team. When leaders understand these chemicals, they gain insight into what truly motivates people, what fosters trust, and what makes an organization thrive. Dopamine is the reward chemical. It gives us a sense of accomplishment when we complete a task, hit a goal, or achieve something meaningful. It drives motivation and keeps us pushing forward. But dopamine alone is not enough. In environments where dopamine is overemphasized, where success is measured solely by numbers, quotas, or achievements, leaders create a culture of relentless pursuit without fulfillment. People become addicted to the next win, the next milestone, but never feel satisfied. Serotonin is the leadership chemical. It is released when we feel valued, respected, and recognized. It strengthens the bond between a leader and their team, reinforcing a sense of pride and belonging. When leaders publicly acknowledge their people, when they celebrate their contributions, serotonin flows. And in organizations where serotonin is present, people don't just work for a paycheck, they work for each other. Oxytocin is the trust chemical. It is released when we feel safe, when we form strong social bonds, when we know that someone has our back. Oxytocin is what makes us feel connected. It's what allows teams to work together seamlessly, to take risks, to be vulnerable without fear of judgment. Leaders who foster a culture of trust, who encourage collaboration rather than competition, create teams that perform at their highest levels, not because they have to, but because they want to. But there is one chemical that works against all the others: cortisol. Cortisol is the stress chemical. It is released when we feel threatened, when we are in a constant state of fear or anxiety. In small doses, cortisol is useful. It helps us react quickly to danger. But when cortisol levels remain high over time, it destroys trust, stifles creativity, and damages relationships. Leaders who create fear-based cultures, where people are afraid to fail, afraid to speak up, afraid of consequences, flood their teams with cortisol. And when that happens, people stop taking risks, stop thinking long-term, stop working together. Instead, they focus only on self-preservation. Great leaders understand the chemistry of leadership. They don't just manage people, they create environments where the right chemicals thrive. They balance dopamine with fulfillment, serotonin with recognition, oxytocin with trust, and they keep cortisol at bay by ensuring their teams feel safe, valued, and supported. Because leadership is not about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about the chemistry of human connection. In business, in leadership, and in life, there is always a choice. Do we chase immediate results, or do we build something that lasts? Do we take the shortcut, the quick win, the easy path, or do we invest in something bigger, something sustainable, something that will outlive us? Too often, organizations prioritize short-term gains over long-term success. Leaders are pressured to meet quarterly targets, hit revenue goals, and deliver instant results. And in that race for immediate gratification, they make decisions that feel good in the moment, but weaken the foundation of the organization over time. Think about companies that cut costs by slashing jobs instead of finding ways to support their employees. Think about leaders who prioritize stock prices over culture, who celebrate record profits while their teams burn out. These choices might look good on a spreadsheet. They might win applause from shareholders, but they come at a cost. When leaders focus only on short-term gains, they sacrifice trust. Employees start to feel like expendable assets rather than valued members of a team. They stop taking risks because they fear failure. They disengage, doing just enough to get by rather than going above and beyond. Innovation slows, loyalty fades, the organization becomes fragile, one crisis away from collapse. But long-term success, that requires a different mindset. It requires patience. It requires leaders who are willing to invest in people even when the returns aren't immediate. It requires resisting the temptation of quick wins in favor of lasting impact. Great leaders understand that success is not measured in quarters, it is measured in generations. They build cultures of trust where employees feel safe, supported, and inspired. They understand that when you take care of your people take care of the mission. And when people feel valued, they don't just work harder, they work with purpose. The difference between short-term gains and long-term success can be seen in the way organizations handle adversity. When a company built on quick wins faces a downturn, panic sets in. Leaders react impulsively, making drastic cuts, sacrificing people to protect numbers. Morale plummets, trust erodes, and the organization spirals into decline. But organizations built for the long term respond differently. They weather the storm because they have built resilience. Their teams remain engaged because they trust their leaders. They adapt, innovate, and emerge stronger, not because they chased quick profits, but because they invested in something deeper: relationships, culture, and purpose. Short-term thinking is easy, it's measurable, it's immediate, but it is also fleeting. Long-term success takes discipline, it takes vision, it takes leaders who are willing to plant seeds today that may not bear fruit for years. But when they do, they don't just build profitable companies, they build legacies. Leadership is not about power, it is not about titles, authority, or control. Leadership is about courage. The courage to do what is right, even when it's difficult. The courage to stand up for people, even when it's unpopular. The courage to make decisions that serve the greater good, even when they come at a personal cost. True leadership is not found in moments of ease, it is revealed in times of uncertainty, conflict, and adversity. Anyone can lead when things are going well, when profits are high, when teams are performing, when the path ahead is clear. But when challenges arise, when the pressure mounts, when the future is uncertain, that is when leadership is tested. That is when courage matters most. Courageous leaders are not fearless. They feel fear just like everyone else. The difference is they do not allow fear to dictate their decisions. They do not let short-term anxieties overshadow long-term purpose. They do not retreat when things get tough. Instead, they step forward. They embrace discomfort. They take responsibility. They lead not for personal gain, but because they know that people are counting on them. But courage in leadership is not just about making bold moves or taking risks. It is about the willingness to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, to say, "I don't know," to ask for help. Too many leaders believe that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness, but the truth is, it is the strongest thing a leader can do. Because when leaders are open, honest, and human, they create an environment where others feel safe to do the same. Courageous leaders also stand up for their people. They take the blame when things go wrong and give credit when things go right. They make tough decisions, not based on what will make them look good, but based on what is right for the team, the mission, and the future. They refuse to sacrifice long-term trust for short-term approval. And perhaps most importantly, courageous leaders make choices that align with their values, even when those choices are inconvenient, even when they come with pushback, even when they mean walking away from comfort and certainty. Because leadership is not about doing what is easy. It is easy to lead when there is no resistance. It is easy to lead when no one is questioning you, when the path is smooth, when the decisions are simple. But real leadership, the kind that builds trust, the kind that changes lives, the kind that lasts, requires the courage to stand firm, to take risks, to put people first, and to lead with integrity no matter the cost. Leadership is not a privilege, it is a responsibility. It is not about taking from those we lead, it is about giving to them. It is about creating an environment where people feel safe, where trust is the foundation, where service is at the heart of every decision. It is about understanding that success is not measured in profits alone, but in the strength of the people who build it. The greatest leaders extend a circle of safety, ensuring that those in their care are protected, valued, and empowered. They prioritize service over self, recognizing that leadership is not about personal gain, but about lifting others up. They understand the role of chemistry, fostering trust and connection so that people work together, not in competition, but in unity. They resist the temptation of short-term gains, choosing instead to invest in cultures that thrive for generations. And above all, they have the courage to lead, to stand up for what is right, to take responsibility, and to inspire others to do the same. The best leaders are not remembered for the power they held, the titles they carried, or the wealth they accumulated. They are remembered for the lives they touched, the trust they built, and the legacy they left behind. Because in the end, leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of those in our charge. And when leaders choose to lead with trust, with service, with integrity, their impact does not fade when they leave. It lasts